What you're going to be doing is making different 2D objects that will act as 3D layers. It's going to depend on what you're looking for, but for this project we're going to make a couple apartment buildings, a water tower, and a skyline. First you're going to need a few things. One, Adobe Illustrator, or something similar, Adobe After Effects, or something similar, and a green screen if you want someone in your window. The first step is to learn how to use Illustrator. Before doing this, I'd never opened it, so I had no idea where to start. I did a bit of research on Google Images to see what skylines looked like, and look for apartment buildings that I liked. Eventually I found a few photos, one of a skyline, a couple apartment buildings, and another with a wooden water tower. An ongoing theme in this will be the more detail you put in, the better it will look. Details like shadows and edges and layers will go a long way. For everything here we're pretty much just going to be using rectangles, using the selection tool to stretch them how we like. For the windows I made them all bright green so we could keep them out later. If you don't want any lights on, you can just set them to any other color. Once you have one window done, you can just hold down the Alt key while using the selection tool and drag to duplicate. Once again, duplicate down to the first level. Make variations in the windows because nothing is ever the same. To make the shadow around things, just duplicate that shape and make sure it's underneath the other layer. Then set that color to black and bring the opacity down. At this point you're pretty much done, but you should add a few details on top of the building, like fans, telephone wires, and a drain pipe. To make your second apartment building, copy your first one, bring it into another canvas, flip it around, then change a few things and poof, you've just saved an hour. The water tower was a little difficult. I had a picture I was looking at while making it and I just tried to copy the details. To make a triangle you can just take the star shape and with the down arrow key reduce the number of points to 3. To move points individually, press A to use the direct selection tool and then either drag or use arrow keys to move it around. When you do this you also have the option to round an edge, which can be very useful. Perspective is tough, but don't worry if it's not perfect. If you do it like me you'll barely see it anyways. Now you have to understand I'm no master at Illustrator, I barely know how to use it, but I just kind of pushed through. The skyline takes a lot of work. Find a photo to pretty much copy off of and it'll be a lot easier. I'm going to skip through most of this because it's just doing the same thing many times. To make buildings I took a rectangle, then using the direct select tool, move the points around to give them angles, then duplicate it onto the other side to make it look 3D. Take a rectangle, make it look yellow if you like, and try to match it up with the angle of the building. Bring it right to the top of the rectangle and duplicate it from left to right. Make sure it all lines up with the top. From my experience, doing this by hand is better than Control or Command D because the angles are usually just off. Once at the end, delete every second window. Now select every window and Alt drag down to duplicate. Press Control or Command D to duplicate all the way to the bottom. You're far from done. Do the same to the other side of the building. Make sure the size of the windows are relative to the distance of the building. This is the worst part. Manually select windows and delete them. Make sure it's as random as possible and make it look natural. To add more detail, select individual windows and change the hue of the yellow slightly. To do the tops of buildings, just add some shapes, like some trapezoids or triangles. Then since buildings usually have lights on top, make the color of the shapes a gradient from your yellow to black. It's rinse and repeat from there for every building. This really took a long time. It's best if you group each building into a separate layer and work on one at once. Use your head to solve problems. Like the circular building, the windows on the edges are thinner than on the center. I did try to add some lights by making a circle, then blurring it, but it's probably better to do this in a different program. Once you have your whole skyline, your apartments and water tower, export them as a PNG and make sure they have a decent resolution. Bring those pictures into After Effects. If you want a person in a window, now would be a good time to go record something on a green screen. Make sure all of your layers are set to 3D by clicking this button. Do the same to your flipped apartment building. bring all of the other elements in and rearrange to your liking, you're probably going to have to adjust the scaling quite a bit. The skyline should be very far back in the Z-axis, and then you can scale it up to the right size. Bring in your camera and make sure the depth of field is checked, and adjust the aperture to your liking. Keyframe your camera from its start position to its end position. I liked adding a little bit of rotation as well. Key out the windows using key light. For windows that you want on, drop a white or yellowish solid behind and parent it to the apartment. For windows you want off, use a dark gray or close to black. Drop in your green screen video and key out the green, and parent it to the apartment building. Use exposure to make it a silhouette. If you want to add more detail to windows, take a photo or find one of some white curtains and place it in front of your green screen video, bringing down the opacity to your liking and parenting that also to the apartment building. To make everything look right, you're probably gonna have to adjust the exposure of individual layers and making sure they look silhouetted. Also keyframe your focus so it starts close and then ends on the skyline. If you like what you see, pre-compose the entire thing. This allows you to add effects as if it's one video layer. To get lens flares, I use the Video Copilot's optical flash plugin, and you just have to keep it as a 2D layer, and then in the effect controls, adjust it where it is in 3D space, line it up with your skyline, and it should stay exactly where it is. You can also add foreground layers and select your apartment building so that stuff can pass in front of your flare. To get the film effects, I used Red Giant's Magic Bullet Looks film plugin, and now it's time to render. I realize now that that tutorial probably makes no sense at all, and for that I'm very sorry. But thank you for watching anyways, and if there's any other tutorials on filmmaking or visual effects that you want to see, just leave a comment, and I'll put in the description below the link to Murderman if you haven't already seen it, and have a great day.